Also, I'm telling you, there's probably a user-friendly way of getting to the web and searching out these bills, these crossover things that we seem to be dueling banjos over. One of which we're going to talk about a little bit. Glad to welcome to the program as we get closer and closer to the cliff where all of these bills have got to be shuffled up and discussed and decided on. And I hope that we don't rush some things through just because it's towards the end of the year. But we got the alert. The storm warning is up for a few things that we'll talk about with Rep. Gene Ward, the minority emeritus leader of the House of Representatives. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Happy
that's a
Monday.
mouthful.
That's a big old mouthful. By the way,
happy Monday. 6 days to go, Mike. We're at the fourth quarter and with 10 minutes on the clock.
I wish everybody could see your smashing ensemble this morning because we're getting down to the short strokes, and I guess negotiating in a nice coat and ties helps a bit.
Yes, this is the last time for the Senate to convince the House to do their side and the House to convince the Senate to do their side, and it's the last tender. You can never predict what's going on.
Yeah.
It's also the season of the gut and replace, not only the negotiations and the arm wrestling, but the gut and replace, of which we haven't seen too much of yet. But for sure,
it's lurking.
I mean, if this is the legislature, it's going to happen.
Now, let me ask you this: Senator Laura Thielen had a playful and yet serious little contest to try and name this procedure. Everybody knows it's coming, right, Gene? I mean, on both sides of every issue, everybody knows.
It was very nuanced. It was not gut and replace. It's like when you take an existing bill, keep it, but then you add something onto it. So
I called it float and bloat. You know, that you just bloat things up. And I didn't get that in time. But I can tell you one thing, that everybody knows it's coming, right? And I know that you and your guy, your staff, you say, all right, you got to tell us right away what is this really saying, because you may have been, and this is to everybody out there that may be sitting on the fence about an issue. You may be decided, and you think you're making the proper decision on something, and in actual fact, you're going to be approving stuff that you're going to be voting for stuff that you don't approve of.
And that's why not only we, but all the public has to stay alert.
Yeah.
And that's why the PLDC got through. It was the last 10 minutes of the session in 2010 where this thing got stuck in.
Right.
Nobody saw it. They went on the assumption in the votes the following day when everybody was tired.
Right.
And said, okay, we got through.
Let's get out of here. Yeah.
And then suddenly the thing raises its ugly head and says, my God, did we do this? Look at this.
Yeah, but look, the good news is that action and reaction happen, and that this thing went the way that it should go.
Exactly.
In other words, that's because everybody, lawmakers and citizens alike, just said, holy smokes, this is no good.
Mike, and that's why I'm really bullish on democracy. To me, it's self-correcting. It doesn't always do the right thing, but when it sees what's going on, it says, okay, pendulum, go back the other way. Yep. Sometimes we go to the extreme on the other side, but we then generally end up in the middle.
Let's talk about one that just so happens to be on the front page of the local section today, and that is the two versions of the increase in minimum wage that are looking at both bodies. Now, there's some saying, why are we even doing the minimum wage? Never mind the rest of us that are resigned to the fact that here it comes. Why so big of a difference between the House and Senate versions, in your opinion?
Well, one is where the numbers are going to increase the amounts more than the other, and the one that I think if it's I didn't see this morning's version of that, but if there's any of the things linked to the consumer index,
consumer price index, right?
Because that would blow it out of the water.
Well, see, one thing is there's a big difference in the amount and the time that it kicks in for the different things. Now, it sounds to me as, like it or not, there is going to be an increase. Okay, that's what it sounds like. It's just what is the increase?
Probably, and most of these amounts remain zero until the last, and this is probably the latest, but generally they're zero until the very last evening, and that's where it's kind of a cat and mouse game. But Mike Witherspoon, yes, inevitably something is going to go up, but inevitably some of the small businesses are going to hurt by this.
What do your constituents say? You know, you represent in our area, and by the way, Gene's my representative because we're in that area up there in the Waikai district, and there are a lot of small business people there.
A lot of small businesses.
And every single one of them will be affected by this. And my feeling has always been, as a former small business person, and I don't guess you ever get out of that wearing that mantra, is that the marketplace dictates what you pay people, not the law.
Mike, it's going to boil down to more wages for a few people or more wages for more spread around
Yeah.
wages for more, because they're not going to increase their employment if they've got to give more to those who are there. That's been basically the message.
Yeah, by the way, you can participate in this on both ends of this. Maybe you're a person that is a minimum wage earner that needs that minimum wage to go up so you can make ends meet. Feel free to call in. Maybe you're a business person that says, okay, it doesn't really make that much difference to me personally, but instead of having 9 employees, I'm going to have 8. You guys make the call.
Mike, on the career scale, I see minimum wage as basically a training wage. We got rid of the notion of a training wage, but basically anybody in minimum wage should see that as they are there in basic training. They are there to learn, to go up the scale and get out of that. That is not a lock-in, and it's only like 7% of the 15,000 people in the whole state out of 600,000 workers are actually under the minimum wage.
Now, let me ask you this, because we go way back, and we've seen this over and over and over again whenever this happens. There are a lot of people that will pay cash, that will do anything that they can to do this. And it really affects so few people. Why is it even an issue? Remember before there was another program, I don't know the name of it, you may remember, where the state would supplement a small business so much an hour to hire people. You know, when we had some employment problems before, you could get $1 or something an hour as a supplement from the government to train somebody.
Like, there's always been the notion that the least among us need the actual help of those who are strong. And I think we've done that to the point where sometimes we've weakened them by not letting them grow up and become self-independent, self-confident. We got to have a minimum wage as an entry wage, I think, inevitably. But if we look at the bigger picture, we have got a business model in Hawaii where 57% of the families can't afford to send their kids to school without a federal subsidy.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of wages big time.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of high-paying jobs.
Are we at half the state's population on some sort of government assistance?
That's basically that 57% of school-age
That's
kids.
spooky.
That is not a good. You can't be proud if you got an economy where 57% need a subsidy to send their kids to school with lunch money. They got to have a subsidy.
I was painfully reminded of the plight out in our neck of the woods over the weekend, to the chagrin of many. There was a lot of people out there with fish nets and scoop nets and trying to accept donations.
Or the food bank.
For the food bank, which is instead of it curing the situation, is growing more and more desperate because it just can't fill the need. We just have that much need that we can't fill it.
Interesting, the war on poverty that's been going on since Lyndon Johnson actually was marked by a demographic of last month where we have more people under the poverty level now than we started the war on poverty.
Right.
Mike, our generation grew up with, don't ask what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for the country. I mean, that's
John F.
why I went into
Kennedy.
Peace Corps. Right now we've got, find out what the country can do for you first, and then if you're going to think about it, think about what you can do for the country second.
You see, herein lies the biggest dilemma. And by the way, you're perfect. We want you to join in on this conversation. I'm getting email and we're getting off the air, but this has got to be on the air. Talk to Raphael, 296-KHNR, 296-5467. We'll get you right away. This is the big dilemma when some people say, look, with all of these entitlements going on, the current reigning party in Washington, D.C. is guaranteeing more votes. Because the more you give people, the more they're beholden, the more they want status quo when it comes to their elected officials.
Mark, in my 8th term now, I'm getting a few of the lessons of what public service is about. And one of the things, unfortunately, is the more you give the people, the more votes
the more
you
they get. Yeah.
And that is not the way the democratic model should be objectively reasoned. It should be where when you do the right thing, when you do the thing for all of the people, not just for those you're trying to get the votes for. And it's unfortunately going to cost us too much money to make everybody happy to get some kind of a system and a payment.
Okay, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? We're going to find out. Gene Ward's in the house. We have good news as well as bad. Stick around. It'll make your time worthwhile. 17 minutes after the hour. The Mike Buck Show on KHNR, Hawaii's Intelligent Talk. Well, like the music suggests, you're supposed to just roll with it. I don't think so. We give you the opportunity this morning to roll away from it. Gene Ward from the House of Representatives in the House. And speaking about the House, we're down to just a matter of days left in the legislative session, which means that if you've got something that you are concerned or druthered about, now is the time. And, like they say, You snooze, you lose, right? This is their opportunity to react. And we got a whole bunch of things, and I want to get to them, but I do know that you have a couple of pets. And since you took the time to come on in here and visit with us, tell me what some of your pet peeves are for this session.
Some of the pet peeves this session are the children of PLDC, Mike.
Yep.
We've got one of the good things about this session, as I said before, corrective
PLDC
democracy.
got killed.
PLDC got killed. It's being signed off, and it's going to be dead. There's a couple of PLDC like DNA bills, like taking school grounds and developing condos on those. I'm not sure that the educational purposes are best served with non-educational construction on them. That's a concern.
I was worried about that in another area, and that is most anybody developing or wanting to do something with a piece of property is not going to do it unless they're assured a return on their investment. So they're not going to spend a lot of money refurbing or putting up buildings if they can't get a lease. And from a lot of educators and a lot of the DOE and BOE guys are worried that, wait a minute, we may need that space. We can't give it up for 50 years.
And Mike, it's another unwritten kind of thing that we had in our district when they tried to close Cocoa Head Elementary School. Can you imagine saying, look at that piece of property. Look what we could put there. Like Pu'uhali in Kalihi.
Yeah, the elementary.
Close it down and stick up a high-rise, and hey, DOE is going to make a lot of money. But at the same time, you cheat the kids and the families who got their kids in those schools. Fortunately, those two schools never closed. But that's one of the untoward things going to happen. Second bill, and everybody listening is going to pay a lot of tax, even though we've pushed the GT tax off the table. This internet tax is still got legs. It's still running. So everything that people are buying now on the internet could be taxed at 4% or
doesn't that have a lot? And I know the problem is there that everybody would protest is not organized. In other words, if somebody in the legislature comes up with some good wording and convince a bunch of people to vote for this, then the general public, the ones that are going to be affected by this tax, they have no organization. They have no way of fighting this.
Mike, in addition to that, there's a legislative lag. I'm still getting people who are telling me, hey, what's with this doubling of the registration? Mike, I put my car in here and I've got to pay double. That was almost 3 years ago or 2 years ago that took place. There's always a lag between when the bills go in and when people are aware of it. And then when they get the sticker shock, it's always like, oh, I never knew this was going on. So, yes, it's not organized, but the timing, there's a huge gap and lag, which is unfortunate.
Okay, now you mentioned before, let's go back to that, the PLDC, the keiki that might surface in these things. From what I understand is, and everybody's told us this, including you, that the way this mechanism works, this gut and replace stuff is, that the bill is pertaining to a very wide category. So as long as a couple of words are in there, it might say tourism.
Related to education. It always starts with the word related to education, related to taxation. Very big umbrella.
Can't we get that fixed? Can't we get that fixed?
That is actually by the law and in the Constitution. Every bill has to have a single title, and the contents of it have to be singular as well as related to that title. Yeah. So it's because it's so generic, you can stick a lot of things underneath it.
Which is happening.
And that's what Gut and Replace is about. I like your gloat and float, by the way. Did Laura give you kudos for that?
No. Oh, yes, she did. She just told me that I put it into. I said float and gloat. Float and bloat.
Float and bloat.
Because you get this thing pertaining to, and then the yabbits come in. It was a one-paragraph bill that now has 14 pages in it, right?
So what won? If you didn't win, who won?
I don't know. I got to go look.
Oh, the jury's still out.
It was actually no. The voting was pretty much all three of the suggestions were pretty much equal. So it's a cliffhanger. It's like she'll have to bring it up again next year.
I think it was clever, very clever.
Okay, but this is. Would you say that this is the real catfight going on right now? That the bills that are left. That you and everybody else, senators and representatives, have got to really watch what you agree or disagree with because of the changes that are being made?
Well, we certainly have to be alert, and we have to know that there's a public pressure now on people not to do those things. But let's look at the ball scores. We got 361 bills that we got to consider. 239 of those have actually already been talked about.
Right.
There's about 100 that hasn't even been heard yet, and we've got 10 days to go. Yeah. Actually, 6 legislative days. It's 54 out of 60. Today's number 54. Mm-hmm. So there's only 6 days to do really any business.
Yeah, because you don't count the weekends. Right.
So it's going to be really quick, and if you remember the last sessions, 9 o'clock at night or 12 o'clock at night on that final evening is like everything on the table stays.
And that's what I'm worried about.
Dead.
Now, somebody did want to know off the air, and it's one of the few questions that I will entertain is, in your opinion, will because we've been through this before. The end of the session's coming up, and sometimes they get extended, or sometimes they don't. It doesn't close on time. It sounds to me like everybody is working to end it on time.
That's the impression.
Yeah,
that
that's
seems
what I get.
to be the intent. That's the ethos of the day, if you will.
Okay, so now aren't there also some financial considerations?
Well, Mike, all those things are adding up. If you just saw the HGA contract, the HSTA contract,
right.
If you put all of those increased collective bargaining amounts, we're probably pushing $300 million.
Right.
If you add it on to what the governor wanted to do with the unfunded liability, that's another $117 million.
How in the world is
early
that going to be done
learning
in 6 days?
It's where, the economy, we were beating our chest that the economy's turned around. But I think if you really look at it with the Inouye Cliff, with sequestration, and what otherwise Calvert Young has said in 2016, there's going to be some pretty lean things going on because a lot of the tax, the $600 million that speakers say kind of helped take away deductions, those things are going to be sunset, and there's going to be like another $60 million puka. So unless things really get robust in the visitor industry, I think the way that we're spending so much, so quickly, that money is going to fastly disappear. Yeah,
and that leads you to think, wait a minute, because of the mandated balanced budget that we have, and
thank God for that.
And many of these bills are tied with an umbilical cord to that. That if it ends in 6 days and these numbers are out there, that there's clearly no way that we can fund some of the spending.
Exactly, and that's where the hard decisions are for the Finance Committee. But so far, the Finance Committee has probably agreed on 75% between the House and the Senate differences with the executive. The Senate is a little bit more robust in their spending efforts than the House has been pretty conservative. So what may come out of it still...
You talked about the Consumer Price Index, which is one measuring stick, right? The other one is the Council on Revenues. And talk about, for a moment before our news break, Gene, how volatile that number can be, because what looks good and these economists predict, there's no guarantee that things are going to go that way. They could get better or they could get a lot worse.
The Council of Revenues are basically the experts, University of Hawaii and economists with the banks and other private sector people who say basically, here, state legislators, is what you're going to be able to spend based upon what our tax projections are, what our interest and all the other things that are going to be projected. Here's what it's like you give, or your wife may give you, like my wife gives me, hey, here's how much you can spend, no more.
Yeah, good luck with that.
But we are in a visitor industry, which is one of the most volatile industries in the world. I mean, it's great, but it's very volatile.
It only takes, people don't get this. I mean, we've seen how jittery the stock market can be. It only takes a little. It only takes a little incident. For instance, at this horrific Boston Marathon tragedy.
Yes, Mike.
And we've got the Honolulu Marathon comes up. I mean, if our Honolulu Marathon were closer, Gene, somebody might just say, hey, you know what? Let's be smart. Let's not do that.
Like, I'm very concerned about that. This is a new brand of micro-terrorism.
Yeah.
Redefining what a pressure cooker. One of the first things I bought my wife after we got married, I got her pressure cooker. Whole new concept of pressure cooker. Whole new concept now of sleeper cells. Those things are real. And a whole new concept of what treason is.
Okay, Gene Ward is in the house. We got plenty of room for you when we come back after our 7:30 news break. Now, we may not all agree on stuff, but we are an American band. Welcome back to part 2 of our chit-chat with Representative Gene Ward of the House of Representatives. Now, actually, like, I don't want to say this, but he's been around for a while. He's kind of like one of these senior citizens. And we're just getting broken in. But I will tell you one thing. I've been doing programs with Gene for many, many years, and several years ago he took the training wheels off, and you haven't had to put them back on again. You know, you ride your bicycle pretty well. Now, speaking about riding your bicycles pretty well, let's talk about something, because I wanted to zero in on what creates legislation and what creates, neighborhood concern. You've always done these talk stories out in our neck of the woods. People come by the boat ramp.
Last weekend.
Yeah, you had one the other day. I saw the big banner out there. You and the senator had this get together. We've talked lately about the Great Lawn. We've talked about how the community out there gets involved, whether it's to have a new strip center or in the case of the bathroom and all of this stuff. I'm hoping that all other areas, House and Senate and City Council areas, people are as active as in our neck of the woods, because it seems to me, Gene, that you don't have any trouble getting input from the community about things that are important.
Well, Mike, like you, the people of Hawaii Kai are very concerned about their community. They love their community. They're very much keeping my feet to the fire on all the issues. And quite frankly, now the Great Lawn has become now, I think, nearing the great debate. The Kamehameha Schools has started a lobbying effort with the City Council, which means they want to take it to a vote. Mm-hmm. And you only need 5 out of 9 to turn
now,
that
when you say taking it to a vote, one of the big concerns has been, and one of the downplayed parts of this issue, is that land has been designated for a certain kind of use.
Preservation.
Now, when was that designation?
In the early 70s.
Yeah.
By the City Council, which had Kaiser wanting to actually put high-rises there at the Great Lawn. Across from Honolulu Bay, for those who haven't remembered where the Great Lawn is, across from Honolulu Bay was designated for high-rises. The wisdom of the City Council in the early 70s, with our own Dan Clement, who lives right in one of the high-rises, back on the mountains of Hahione, he had it with other members, the wisdom to say, that should not be commercial. That should be preservation, which now the move is afoot that members of the City Council are being told, hey, let's turn that back into a commercial so we can put the strip mall, or in more euphemistic terms, a village shopping center.
Yeah, a village shopping center.
Where
sounds so nice in village. Right?
And the community, and the reason why I had the town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago is that, their polls, Kamehameha Schools polls said a 70% for, my polls said 70% against. And we had talked a year before to have a meeting with the community, but they never got back to me. So once this got so out of hand, it's like, okay, let's bring it to the people. That night, Mike, there were almost 300 plus people, plus we had no parking left at Camilo Iki Elementary. And when I asked for a show of hands, 6 out of those hundreds of people said yes, they're for making it into
but you and I know that the only people that are ever at these things generally are somebody that is usually opposed to something going on.
That's generally true.
Yeah. However, I think that as a lesson and an exercise on how something works is important, because this sort of issue is not restricted to the Hawaii Kai area. This is every single part of our state has similar things going on.
And
with regards to land use,
a lot of people from both Ainahaina, Kuli'o, Neo Valley, Waimanalo showed up.
Yep.
And Mike, you mentioned a good point about democracy. It's Lincoln said of, by, and for the people. That's true. But it's of, by, and for the people who vote that really makes the difference in the political.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, don't wait for this fat gang.
It's those who are actively engaged. It's the squeaky wheel. It's those who go and initiate ideas and make change by acting upon them.
You know what I think is very interesting? We're going through this discussion on all these bills and all these issues in a non-voting year. So when I say we, the public, we don't have any say in the matter. We're now relying on the officials that have been elected to do the right thing by us. But if we don't tell them what to do, they may not do what we want them to do.
And those 5 out of 9 City Council members can churn that preservation land at the Great Lawn into commercial with just 5 votes. And that's why that movement that's going now, I say the Great Lawn has become a great debate, because now we've got to get to the City Council as a way of preventing that.
Okay, well, let's talk about another thing that has 2 issues. One is out in Makaha. There's a group of citizens working very hard to get a highway rerouted and a thing changed so that the park and the dressing room, the bathroom is not across the street from the beach. You don't have to cross the highway to go to the Lua. Well, that's one issue. But out in our neck of the woods, we have a beautiful Lua that doesn't work.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
This has been going back and forth like talk about a football. What the heck's going on out there for 10 years? Plus, there's been a Lua that you can't use.
Like, my office prides itself. We do international issues. We do national issues. We do state. We do local. We do any and all. But when it comes down to that Lua at Mauna Loa Bay, and for almost 3 years being closed to the public, with a cesspool that's already up to the eyeballs of it, and having permits that haven't been able to be given, for having reconstruction not able to be done. It's an embarrassment.
There's a lot of people that don't really know, and I know that you've had many discussions.
First of all, it's the wrong location. It should be down by Huinalo, where the canoes are, where all the kids are.
Let me ask you that. I am a real user of the boat ramp, as you know, and all of my fishing.
And that's
friends.
where the people are.
Right, and also our friends at the Huinalo Canoe Club, which literally have hundreds of young kids and not so young kids at this time of the year down there every single day, practicing their sport of canoe paddling. Now, is it safe to assume that these people have to go to the bathroom from time to time? And if so, where are they going?
I don't think a prerequisite is the non-shishiing young woman or man to become a canoer. I mean, of course they go. I mean, that's the ridiculous part of it.
Now, excuse me, but they must be going in the bushes, whatever bushes there are, on the sand or in the water.
And the Department of Health probably knows this, and still we're doing the absurdity of not having located it there, number one, and number two, not fixing the one that's actually at the opposite
Is it conceivable to think that someday there might be two? There might be one down by the paddlers and one at the other end.
I have a dream.
Oh, that's well done, Gene. Well, I mean, seriously. Now, but everybody wants to say, well, look, everything can be fixed. Why isn't this thing fixed? What's it going to take?
You know, it's the squeaking wheels and the double teaming like we did with the Great Lawn. All the elected representatives called for that town hall meeting. But now doing the follow-up and getting these things in action, it's going to take people to be out front and continually out front. I think for those who know Stanley Chang, the councilman there, he's the city councilman contact person.
Boy, he must be just hammered by this. But I still think that when you talked about the permitting process, these are people that need a restroom. And I'm not saying that the PLDC issue comes up here, but I'm telling you, there's certain things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Physically, what needs to be done?
Actually, they need to reconnect
what used to run into the cesspool.
Well, they used to run into a cesspool underneath the Kalanianaole Highway.
Right.
To the American Waters sewage system on the other side of the road.
Right.
And the permitting to go under the highway and to get that connection has been the hang-up.
Now, can they go under the highway without disturbing the highway?
That's probably one of the moot points.
That's got to because I would say that being that I'm a resident out there and I can tell you that I know a little bit about it, that what would happen is, let's say you were going to have to bypass that area. You would not be able to use that one little strip of the highway between the Lua, where the Lua is, and, say, the shopping center. So you'd have to go around. You'd have to go up Keahole or whatever that street is and go all the way around.
Like the marathoners.
For how long would that happen to be?
If we all remember when Kalanianaole Highway was being...
That took about 20 years or whatever it was.
Oh, boy, that was a nightmare. That's the unfortunate way.
Yeah.
In another reminder of where government is an embarrassment. I was driving yesterday and kaboom, and my wife said, "Didn't you see that giant pothole? That was a cavern that you just drove into." And we still haven't got our roads fixed. And if you want to talk about what's really in front of our face, in your face, are the bad roads on this.
Now, how much of that?
And the city county level.
I know that there are some bills that are looking at CIP of capital improvement funds, and there are some that are looking at maintenance funds. Getting our roads fixed is not new improvements, is it? It's maintenance.
Exactly.
And the money has been taken out of that at the state and county levels. The money has been systematically removed from what would have gone to fund repair.
A number of years ago, it was over $100 million came out of that, flew out of it.
Yep.
And instead of admitting that was the wrong thing to do, they said, well, we're just going to increase our taxes.
Yep.
We increase your registration. And that has not worked.
How scary is that? Gene Ward is in the house. 296 KHNR is the number. You want to stay on point or change degrees, you can do that. We got more to come, including some specific bills that you can go and take a look at. And more importantly, voice your opinion about. That's all coming up as we continue on KHNR on the Mike Buck radio program on a beautiful Monday morning.
KHNR Traffic. You're listening to the Mike Buck Show on Hawaii's Intelligent Talk, AM 690, KHNR.
Well, so what's up around the bend, you want to know? We've been talking about it off the air and on the air. It's called GNR, Gut and Replace. One of the biggest issues this year, this legislative session, and I'm going to spend some time with Gene Ward on it. We did get a lot of questions off the air about it, but that's not driving me. What's driving me is this engagement that we have talking about education. A huge section of our state budget, as you know, the largest section, goes to educating our keiki. And we are fiercely proud of the Ohana spirit and all of this stuff, and we know how important a lot of things are. We've heard a lot of people getting together this year, formulating some pretty interesting stuff about early education. And I saw on the front page today of the local section of the paper, Gene, that we're getting ready for our first round of college prep exam. 50,000 kids in grades 8 through 11 are going to be taking these ACT tests, and I got my fingers crossed, but I'm not that optimistic. We've had problems with this in the past. Let's go back to the bill that we're looking at. We talked about briefly. Let's get into it a little bit. Early education. Sounds great. Everybody loves it, but
it is something you can do very poorly, very easily, Mike. It's like I say, for those who know Indonesian, it's one of the or Malay or Indonesian, one of the easiest languages to learn poorly. Early education is clearly from the time one is in life, out of the womb, education takes place. What is the highest correlation with student achievement, however, is the parental involvement, the mother, the father, the aunties, the uncles. And what we've got, and the unfortunate thing, is an $80 billion program called Head Start, which under President Johnson was part of the war on poverty. We have basically a 2-year study that said, hey, it's been a failure.
Yeah, it didn't work.
My question is, what do we think in Hawaii we can do different to make the lessons learned not be repeated? Or let's say the mistakes that were made, that they would not be repeated.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not convinced that the way I see the model that it's going to do that. But what the people of Hawaii, those who are listening, have to really face if this bill passes, it's Senate Bill 1084. It's a bill for a constitutional amendment to allow private funds to fund early education, subject to non-discrimination in, quote, these public schools, and for the early education then to be funded and have 4-year-olds, 4.5-year-olds educated at those preschools. Preschools that teach kids responsibility, behavior, and other things clearly are effective. The impact of this on the dysfunctional families, however, is twofold. Number one, they don't show up as much as the other kids. We've got these programs in parts of the state where the kids who really need it don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, for those who have been showing up, the amount of lasting impact. In other words, when you go back to your social group, you go back to a dysfunctional family, those things tend to take their toll in the classroom after the 3rd grade and then all up to high school. The dropout data is, Mike, 68% of the dropouts end up in jail.
Yeah, this is
so
disturbing.
Education is key, but you've got to get those dysfunctional families.
Yeah, but Gene, you know what's happening here is the minute you say this, you have these groups that come out that are in support of this early education. They're right. They're right with regards to you do the right thing to these kids, they are going to be learning machines.
Exactly.
But it doesn't take into consideration the horrendous costs of running a program at a time where we have to worry about what are we preparing them for. I mean, if we prepare this early education and then we're not up to snuff in the classrooms with regards to teachers and evaluations and everything else, we're wasting money.
It's interesting from the HSTA and some teachers' point of view is that, hey, we're still trying to fix our existing educational plan, which is the normal K through 12, and we don't have the money, and here's basically a $100 million program plus to do early education. So can we do both poorly? Yeah, the way that we spread ourselves too thin. And I think HST has also got the notion that this is a voucher program. The Attorney General said, no, it's not a voucher program. And the HSTA lawyers say it is a vouching program. So the funding mechanism is one thing. And then the whole notion of having it effectively done to the families that actually need it.
Yeah, and that's the key. Let me ask you this. We're bandying about these numbers of $100 million.
127.
Okay, now I don't know any program run by this government in the country, in the history of our country, that has ever come in on what it says it was going to come in on. So in actual fact, we're having to look at something to provide revenue for an additional maybe couple of $100 million in spending.
Well, Mike, my sense is that there should be pilot programs. We should do it smaller and do it well and then measure it. I mean, we've got a bill that says let's just do it. The same way that we got a bill that says let's replicate public funding from what they did on the Big Island with county council elections, and now let's do it in the House and the Senate. I mean, you shouldn't do things knee-jerk like that just because the governor says that this is what we should do. We should be a little bit more rational, scientific, objective, and analytical, and let the data talk. I'm embarrassed to say that we spent $80 billion on something that took 50 years to find out didn't work on the Head Start program.
Sure.
They knew earlier that those guys watching Sesame Street were the middle-class kids, not the kids who were out there who should be watching.
Who really needed the help. Yeah. Okay, now, that being said, all of these things are correlated and tied into should they all survive in cost of funding them. And I'm still very, very worried that although you mentioned at the outset of the program, and I'm really glad that we're going to have at least one more opportunity during the waning days of this session to address those bills that increase revenue. That I know that there are some that are they're being massaged around, and we should be scared because they're not going to spend any less money. They're going to spend a lot more, and we don't have it, so we're going to have to go get it somewhere.
I'll give you a case in point.
Yep.
I call it the anti-immigrant bill. Basically, it's for money transmitter licenses, those who send money overseas. The license goes from a couple $100 to $2,000, and from $3,000 to $20,000 for the renewal of the license.
Now, these are people, Gene, that are facilitating me sending money to my cousins in the Philippines or wherever.
Exactly.
Right. So where I used to go down to my neighborhood bodega and buy this and then say, I'm going to go send Auntie some money. These are the fees that are going up.
And those fees are going to be passed on to those
to the consumers.
Going to deny people in the barrio. I mean, it's when I was at USAID, we found that the best foreign aid was not the foreign aid that the UN and the US gives. It was actually repatriation money that was for people working overseas in those nations that were helping those nations build up and their cash flows coming from workers in other countries.
So this is one of the scary things.
It's just, it doesn't make good policy. It's penny wise, pound foolish.
Yep. And yet we do know that there are other ways that revenues can be increased. I mean, we talked about the vehicle tax, which you're just hearing now people are finally realizing it. 6 months later when they get the bill and what used to cost them $200 is now costing them $400.
It's costing a lot of money to run the vehicle, which people didn't realize when it was happening that it was actually happening. Unfortunately, there's going to be, if this internet tax goes through, people probably within 6 to 16 months will wake up to say, my God,
wait a minute. You know what? I'm so glad you brought that up. Which is the number?
Senate Bill 948.
SB 948.
SB 948.
If you don't already shop online, and come on, almost everybody does, even if not to use it for a bargaining chip, you better understand that. And as a merchant, retail merchant back in the day, Gene, I would have probably supported this. Because I'm thinking, keep it green, keep it in Hawaii.
But Mike, you're an entrepreneurial guy. You probably also would have gone on the internet and competed with these guys who are selling. So you had an equal playing ground.
Well, I would have gone up and said, like a lot of these guys are doing, look, I know it's cheaper on the internet, but when you pay the shipping, I'm cheaper.
Oh, there you go.
Or when it breaks, I'm going to fix it. Or I'm going to give you your money back.
Because when you send stuff out of the state as a retailer, you don't have to pay the GT tax. And every retailer, every brick and mortar guy in Hawaii's got
Somebody wants to know, though, how can they really do this on a state-by-state level? Would anybody pay attention to it?
The enforcement issue is going to be a real problem. The Department of Taxation is actually against this bill. Or let's say they didn't really come out swinging against it, but they very subtly said, we don't really think it's a very good bill. But it's where it's got one of the biggest tax increases written.
That one is Senate Bill 948.
948.
And that is directly with an umbilical cord attached to your wallet. Right?
Good. Gloat and float, or however you put that.
Yeah. Float and,
float and bloat.
Float and bloat. In other words, how green can the Bill's garden grow? Speaking about Green Day, though, Gene, we have made heads and bounds, and really quickly, a lot of people want to know about the tax credits for solar. A lot of people want to know what's going on. Are we still going to have this umbrella? Are we going to tighten up some loopholes? Can we afford not to have these credits?
Mike, I would suggest to all your listeners that if they've contemplated it, they should do it post-haste.
Yep.
At the end of this year, it goes down another. If the bills that are in the process are passed, it's going to go down 10 to 15% every year for the next 3 years. It may flatten out in 2017 at about maybe 10 or 15%, which to me, we're going to see the whole PV industry that is giving great birth to growth suddenly die off and just be a mediocre kind of program that it has been.
Representative Gene Ward, fighting the good fight. Thank you so much for being here, Gene.
Thank you, Mike.
And I know it's going to be tough. And remember that Senate Bill 948 and also that 1084, just to name a few.